and who are doing work in the region and doing some amazing work. We call it Kampong Chat because we call the Green Collective our little green kampong in the red dot. And the idea of the Kampong Chats was to bring topics which kind of inspire us as social entrepreneurs to do what we do. And we wanted to give a voice to all these social entrepreneurs and us, and that's what the Green Collective is trying to do. Um, Piffin, if you could just go to the next few slides. I don't want to talk too much about the Green Collective, but we are basically a collective of different sustainable brands which are curated based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have a physical presence of the collective at the Funan, and we have recently also started online, so you can find a whole range of sustainable products which fit into your everyday lifestyle. So that's what we do. And I will stop the marketing for Green Collective right there so that we can talk about more interesting things. This is a topic which I actually have been associated with for the last 5 years, the relevance of crafts and heritage. Much less talked about unless and until we work with the Asian Civilization Museum in Singapore. But my journey, and I wanted to start with that. I remember I built an artisanal brand that started around 4.5, 5 years back called Kupita. And one of the things that inspired me to build Kupita was a TEDx video of a Japanese chemical engineer talking about how the craft of the Japanese craft of making a cast iron stove has stood the test of time. And the funny joke in that was that he says that I love having my omelette in the morning without it being too oily. So the world invented steel, which required too much oil. The world invented Teflon, which was carcinogenic if you scratched it. So we all went back to the cast iron. Now, the cast iron was the cast iron pot was actually a technology, a skill, a craft which was perfected over 5 to 600 years. And when we look at human evolution and human history, we forget the role of craft and how craft is actually technology which needs to be preserved. And that is a huge significance that actually is sometimes not talked about. And that's why UN, under the US UNESCO banner, puts it as intangible culture, and it's the skills which are behind this which needs to be really, really preserved. So that is a very interesting example. There are more interesting examples. I'd love to talk about it as we go through this discussion. The format is going to be that we have two amazing social entrepreneurs over here doing amazing work, working with artisans and preserving crafts in different ways. So they will present and talk about their journey, the relevance of crafts for in preserving heritage with the work they do. And what you can see on the screen is you can go to slido.com, either on your phone or on your laptop. So if you go to slido.com and you can use the code over here saying crafts, the hashtag crafts. So during the course of the presentation, you can keep asking questions over there. And at the end of the session, we will take the questions one by one. If you don't have a question, you can also upvote or upvote a question so that we get that you really want to know about it. So brief introduction is done. Now let me pass the screen because there's no mic here. So let me pass the screen to Yuki, who can talk about her work with Style Cat and the communities we're
Yeah.
working with.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Yuki Higson, and I handle the brand Style Cat. So, just a brief background on my brand journey. So, Style Cat, we actually started this 3 years ago, and my husband and I, we love to travel, and then we were on a resort in Phuket, I remember, and then I saw that each hotel had a beach bag, and I said, "Wow, like that simple beach bag." Is very abundant in the Philippines because I'm Filipino. And then it's like everywhere you go in the Philippines, like a lot of provinces and communities know how to weave. So I said, it would be nice to take that craftsmanship and make it into something modern. That's why we started StyleCat. So it's a 3-year-old brand, and we specialize into hand woven bags, earrings, necklaces, and we work with different communities that specialize in weaving. So, for example, the one you see on the screen is our community from Bicol, and they harvest the abaca fiber, like everything in their area, and they dye it naturally. And then, like this one is a community of weavers in northern Luzon, where they hand loom rolls of fabric thread by thread using this very, I would say, like traditional machine. I mean, not machine, because they hand loom it, and it's been passed on from generation to generation. So what we do is, a common problem they encounter is like they don't make any sales, because like one is their location, and then two, they're limited with payment modes. So what we do is we get in touch with them and take their fabric and make something modern and stylish, hopefully versatile. So this is one of our best sellers, our head wraps. And then what we do is we use the fabric and mix it, say, with our artisans who do wooden beads, or our artisans who do weaving. So we kind of cross over the community to to give everybody an equal opportunity as well. And then so this is one of our weavers in the Laguna province. And then this one, she specializes in pandan. And then they hand embroider everything using natural materials such as raffia, abaca, and seagrass. So there, so that's a brief brand introduction about StyleCat. And currently, we are in 5 countries, thankfully. Oh, sorry. And yeah, that's it. That's a brief background on our brand.
Thanks a lot, Yuki. I think we will get you to talk more because there'll be so many more stories behind StyleCat actually. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll start with a couple of questions. And what I would love to understand, and going back to the topic on the relevance of crafts, maybe from your point of view, and talk about Philippines, because I know the length and
You've
breadth of
been
Philippines
there.
being, yeah, I've lived with communities there. So, but I know the length and breadth of it has so many different and ancient cultural techniques. So, how did you go about? What were your interactions? Maybe share some of your experiences.
Yeah. So, just a brief background. The Philippines is comprised of more than 7,000 islands. That's more than 100 different dialects. So you can just see how diverse the communities are. And what amazes me is every time I go to a specific province, or every time I meet a new community, it's like I am just in awe of what they can do with their hands. For example, the hand looming the hand looming weavers I showed you a picture earlier, the ones who make our head wraps. They hand loom it, like they have whirlwind patterns. They are inspired by nature, or like each pattern or each the print that you see is really based on something that they experience. So that's what I find so beautiful with working with Philippine artisans. They are just truly so creative, and I can't be more proud than to bring their products into a global stage.
Yuki, when you started working with communities, did you approach multiple communities at one time, or you started with one? And
Honestly, like my brand journey in the Philippines, I mean, you've stayed here. It could be difficult. It could be difficult, one, because when you try to find a weaving community, they are really in rural areas. They are in the mountains, in provinces. Signal could be weak. It's so hard to reach them. When you're doing product development, when I was starting the brand, and I said, "Oh, I just want something a simple flamingo embroidery," but it's like you really have to handhold them throughout the whole journey. just just so you can work together and collaborate and execute that vision. So I would say my brand journey would be approaching multiple ones, because you could approach multiple ones. One community can be so passionate, but if they don't have like the means, like the communication or the signal or the internet to send pictures, it hampers the whole product development process. So it's difficult, but yeah, I mean, what worked with us was just approaching a lot. Who and in the Philippines, weaving is really ingrained in our culture. Our hammocks, our baskets, our roofs. We have houses with like woven roofs, so it's really ingrained in our culture. So we have a lot of communities doing it.
Yeah, the most amazing example I remember is the Tanalak weavers, who
Yes, the dream
so the
weavers.
dream weavers, and for everyone to know, it's a tribe. And Yuki, please help me here with, because my pronunciations might not be right. But it's a tribe, and what they do is they weave on abaca fiber, and the patterns that they weave are basically based on some of the dreams they see, and that's where the dream weavers concept comes in. And there is so many interesting and indigenous weaves in Philippines that, I mean, and the best part is they're very colorful, which is very Asian.
Yes. So it's just so cool, like the process of hand looming, and that's how they do the tinalak. That's what they
Yeah,
call it, right? So a tribe from Mindanao does that,
yeah,
and they even down to the dyes. They use natural dyes based
yeah.
on the fruits and the roots that they have. So that's really very amazing.
That's the beauty of working in the sector, that you are always in awe of the work. And one question I had from you, because working with communities and you're talking about like challenges, completely familiar with that.
Yeah.
Although I loved it when I was living with the community, because I did not have phone connection for a week, and it was quite a relief. But but it is, while running your business, it's a challenge for sure. But how do you see these communities as you're working with them? Because a lot of our craft work and the craft artisans are basically, a lot of the culture is in a preservation stage, like we need to preserve it.
Right,
Whereas
I agree.
the younger generations, do you see them picking it up beyond after their parents? Because
Mm,
there are not organized crafts education schools and stuff. I know Philippines has a central body which awards people on craft related stuff. But where do you see, like, do you see craft losing out to modern trends, or is it more
yeah.
about?
When I was starting Style Cat, I would have some people tell me, how can you scale that? It's handmade. You can't have, 10,000, you have to tap so many communities. But, I say that's actually the beauty of it. It's all unique, it's handmade. And if you need a higher quantity, you just find more communities in the Philippines. And I agree that, it is something, people are saying, oh, we have to preserve the culture. I think our main responsibility and the biggest challenge is actually just connecting them to a sustainable market, connecting them to a global platform, and using the traditional handicrafts that they offer, instead of saying, oh, it's old school, or they use it for giveaways. Especially in the Philippines, sometimes you will meet communities and weavers who undervalue their work because no one's buying. They think it's, like, for souvenir shops, or yeah, for corporate giveaways. But we just take the same weaving technique and make something modern and more stylish. And again, it's finding a market for them, and that's what they really appreciate. When they see their work, when they see it in like displayed in the Green Collective, they love it. I tell my weaver here in the Philippines, like, hey, your products made it into Singapore. Most recently, we got on board the Chris Shop catalog. So for them to see something they made and now it's being shipped around Singapore, that's just amazing. So I think the main goal here is just to keep finding markets for them, like somewhere where people will really value traditional craftsmanship, value slow fashion, value handmade. So That's
No,
what I think.
I think that's amazing what you're saying, Yuki, and I will drop a couple of links here for everyone who's interested to understand this topic, because this is a slightly complicated topic. Because when, like, Yuki is talking about weaving, um, it is again one of the lesser known facts that it was weaving which led to the jacquard loom, which used to have punch codes. So weaving is almost mathematical, and
Yes, it's
the
an answer.
jacquard loom actually is the basis behind computer coding. So actually, we couldn't be doing this session today on our computers or messaging each other on WhatsApp if we do not have the weaving knowledge, and that's something which is not known. And I'm going to drop a link of a YouTube link over here, and I'm always enamored by this example, because this is about a weaving community in Bolivia, the Aymara tribe, and it is quite amazing how they actually they wanted to make medical devices for little kids, because this is a hilly region. A lot of the kids had heart issues, so it was basically making stents, but the stents needed to go in the heart and open up inside. And what they did was they could never manufacture it, so they used the weavers to weave those things, which were woven like the frocks or the dresses that the Ayamara. So I think, Yuki, what you're saying is so relevant, and so relevant to understand that the craft preservation is more about the skill preservation of weaving, whereas the form and the product might change.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
and maybe should change, because it's been changing for the last 800,000, 1,500 years. So cool. That was amazing. I'll come back to you with questions. I can see some of them are coming in, but
Yes, feel free, everybody. Send in your questions. I'd be happy to answer it.
perfect. I'll pass it to Ray from Purnama, which has a very, very interesting story. And we've been around for some time, and
Yeah.
we used to be the same vendor markets a lot.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be hosting this with you. Over to
Thank
you, Ray.
So, Purnama, the brand itself, we are a slow fashion brand and upcycle solutions provider with upskilling and also education outreach programs in the region. And you can hear the word outreach programs because that's how it all started. We are a social enterprise. We are trying to integrate those in need, the marginalized, into the society. And how we got there is because growing up, myself and my husband, the co-founders, we have been fortunate in having the opportunity to study abroad. Great schools, great locations. And with that, we wanted to give back. So when we relocated to Singapore 12 years ago, we start traveling and we saw beautiful handicrafts. Just like everyone here is trying to say, there's a lot of simple weaving, heart weaving, traditional weaving, even just using wood and different materials out there. So we really love it. And we also start adopting children in terms of supporting and sponsoring their education. And we know that's not sustainable. What if I lose my job? What if something else happened? How do we make sure that the students that we, or the youths who we sponsor education, will continue to get sponsorship? So we traveled in Nepal and we found Pokhara collection. So that's how it all started. So we were very much inspired with all the different lifestyle that's happening in Nepal, and that's where the watching how the weaving is being done. Definitely is a slow fashion brand. Like you said, yes, we wanted to have lots of orders, but how do we manage those large orders? How do we look at different communities in terms of weaving communities? And it is traditional, since it is about putting those in need into society, integrate them into society. It is about livelihood more so than crafts. But the craftsmanship starts to come in as they learn how to weave. So that's kind of like the story how it all started, but I can keep going to talk about the brand itself. Smire's not there.
No, I'm pretty much
Okay.
yeah. And I think that's amazing. But uh, how have you seen? Like, I know this journey started with Nepal,
Yeah.
and have you now started working with multiple artisans in multiple countries, or has it been the focus been Nepal still?
The focus has been about two countries only, Indonesia and Nepal.
Yeah.
it's not just like the Philippines. You've got a lot of mountains. In Nepal, we work with skill development program. So the more orders we get, the more women we can put into a 2-year skill development program. So again, like I mentioned, it is an outreach program that we run. So the bottom line of us being a slow fashion brand is also supporting those in need. And Indonesia is a craftsmanship in using the upcycled materials such as upcycled tire inner tube, even repurposed plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, how we can weave that with organic cotton thread to make a product. Okay. But I think for the sake of this craftsmanship discussion, I like to focus just on Pokhara collection, because here you look at the uh, the disadvantaged women who we try to bring, or we do bring, into the skill development program. And at the end, they're learning this weaving skill. They're learning the natural dye processes, and it's using traditional wound loom, which is similar to traditional wound looms all over in the region as well. If you go to South America, the same thing. But to me, when I was there, the materials is quite primitive, but primitive yet you get such beautiful handmade work, and it's high quality. And it's amazing when you're looking at the mass production of products out there versus the handmade products, and you see which one would last longer. And this is where I would say I do not expect our Nepali partners to adopt the methods of unsustainable mass production. So that's definitely one that we don't do. And this is how we want to support them, support the artisans in bringing them, to give them the livelihood that they need.
But Ray, do you feel the stress also from the artisan side? Because Pokhara has been a craft center for ages.
Yeah.
Because of the trading around it, and artisans have been there. A lot of gem related work, if I'm not wrong, also happens. But do you see any stress, and do you see a movement towards leaving crafts because of the pressures?
Yeah, I see that, but I think there's the country itself is still I would say when they hear about us being in a fast-paced environment, they just couldn't understand it, right? So I think the way the culture is going to be kept there is going to be sustainable as long as we, the consumers, as well, than just we who are trying to bring that craftsmanship into market, needs to understand and not to push that concept of, again, I'm using it, unsustainable mass production methods. So I think by doing that, you will see the preservation of it.
Yeah, I think that's very right, and I think that's so important because of the number of livelihoods that actually, especially in Asia,
Yeah.
if we look at the developing part of the world, especially Asia, it's just the numbers are actually quite quite staggering. And I like the example that you were talking about, the amazing weaves, and this. I was attending a lecture in Asian Civilization Museum, which was on British colonization of India. And it was quite interesting because apparently the Britishers could not get Indians because when they colonized, they imposed a lot of taxes and duties for Indian handloom goods, which used to sell a lot in Europe. And they were making it in Manchester mills and getting the cloth here. One of the ways the cloth became popular was the patterns were the same, but it was just industrialized. And they started putting a lot of godly images on it. And that's how fashion as an industry completely got transformed. And that was the stop of slow fashion and start of fast fashion at that time. But patterns and all space so much and means so much. And especially like you work so much in Indonesia. And I think that is a question I wanted to ask both of you, Yuki, as well as Ray. Um, uh, if you look at Indonesia, or actually Philippines also in certain matters, like with batik, certain motifs are to be allowed in a certain way. And that's true about weaves as well as motifs across cultures, across countries in Asia. Do you feel sometimes sticking to the culture a lot? Because because I know both of you do a lot of product development, working with the artisans. So I would love to know your views as business owners, as people who are trying to innovate on the product side. how much does sticking to old traditions or cultures, which we need to preserve,
Mhm.
um, act as a hindrance to coming up with new product ranges for you guys?
Yeah, I can speak to that first on this one. Let's just talk about the Pokhara right now, then I'll go to the Indonesia side. And there's colors, just talking about colors, okay? There's a lot of times I want certain material loom in today's Western urban colors, and even the design of how it should look. And that is just a battle, right? In terms of product development. Then you have to not saying sacrifice, but you compromise to what they have. So a lot of times I would say, what loom do you have available? And keeping that uniqueness and the ethnicity of the local work. So with that, that's what I work with, and then I just mix match with other looms to make the product. Otherwise, it would be difficult, and that's how the preservation. Sure, I will compromise the fact that the artisans would have the same loom, not exactly the same design, but the same loom being sold at their store. It's fine because again, what's the intent? What's our objective? Our objective, at least for Purnama, is to bring in and integrate those in need into society. So we have to stay true. Like, what is your mission statement? What's your values that you need to carry forward here? Is it about all profit, just bring it out to the mass, or are we looking into supporting those in need? And that's the conversations that we have to have. And a lot of times, and you have to have the really good truth in terms of discussion with your partners, because they would say, no, we cannot have that color, that is bad luck. For example, I'm not saying it's colors bad luck, but you kind of go through that conversation first. That is a no in our culture. We're not going to do it for you. So we ask all the different questions. And Indonesia is the same way. Certain drawings that I'm drawing it, and can we cut it certain ways, or even to look certain shape? Ooh, that looks like this and that. That they may have certain beliefs in. So we have to go back. And it's the same thing, not the word cultural beliefs, it's what your values. We're against single use plastic, for now, against it. So we would ask the product itself as well, what is this made of? If the bracelet is done by non corrosive metal and it's not so pretty, but then if it's replaced by a nice black mat, but the black mat is actually plastic, compromise. I'm not going to go look pretty with a black mat, but because it's plastic. So it's similar to that concept.
I think that's a great, and I think I wanted to comment on the past you that I think it's $1 million questions. How do you get it right in the first place? Sometimes this can be so tricky because it's a process. Sometimes working with communities, but moving on to Yuki, because in your case, actually, product development is so core to what you're doing. Do you face any such challenges? Any examples that you can tell
I
us?
would say, I mean, as I super agree, like, you have to super respect the patterns, like the tinalak by a tribe from Mindanao, that since they're weaving their dreams, you have to make sure, you have to cut it properly, and you have to ask, and you have to make sure you're not using like the cloth for like the dead onto like a blanket, so like, just, appropriating it properly. And a hindrance, I would say, for Style Cat, since the products are made of natural materials such as abaca and seagrass, it's very weather dependent. So that's also a hindrance that I encounter with my business, because if you're against time and you're hitting a certain timeline, you're following the fashion calendar and you want it shipped out by X date, and then suddenly there's a typhoon, and they say, so we're sorry, we're not able to make your order. It's raining here. So, factors like that are a hindrance for Salcat. But, in terms of the skill, like mentioned earlier, we're all about preserving the technique, not the silhouette itself, not the shape, but it's all about like preserving the same weaving skill and reinventing that. So we're really enjoying the collaboration with the artisans, and so far when we do a collaboration and bounce off ideas, like, do you think this silhouette will work? Or when I ask for deep green, can your natural dyes really give this kind of deep green? Will we achieve that? So yeah, so that's our process, and so far we've been thankful that the journey has been very pleasant, and we've been partnered up with really good communities so far. So yeah, so we just turn the hindrance into, like a challenge, and just plan way ahead just to avoid all the weather mishaps.
Yeah, I know. When you talk about the cutting the fabric the right way,
Right. Yes,
I
very
can relate to
important.
that because initially when you start, you get all of these things wrong, and you learn from your mistakes. And we actually have someone from working with the Indonesian artisans, but I don't know, Hannah, if you are in a place where you can actually unmute yourself and talk. Would love to get your views on it as well, but I can completely understand if you are on the way or Hannah.
Hi. I did not
Hey,
expect to speak at all.
I'm sorry,
Hi.
but that's okay.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not gonna have my camera on.
Yeah.
But no, I was just laughing inside when Yuki said, "I'm sorry, we can't make your order. It's raining here." That is so relatable.
Right?
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, like for us, because we have batik, which is it's dyed, right? So it's the whole fabric is deep dyed, and then you have to hang it to dry for a period of time, before you either, if especially if you're using natural dye, it's a process that has to be repeated. And yeah, it's hilarious when it's like, hey, I can't, like, I know I said I was going to deliver next week, but I can't. It's raining. It's just, and it's something that you kind of have to take into account. It's one of the challenges and one of the fun parts of working with the community, I suppose.
That's so true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or customers would understand about the fact that it takes longer to create a loom, and that's because here's the process. Like, what? Yes, you have to hand dye it in a bucket
Yeah.
and dry it and wash it and dry it out again. And like, really, you don't have a factory? That is the factory.
No, I think,
Exactly. In fact,
yeah,
we had sorry, we
no,
had that
go ahead.
experience once before in the Green Collective, right? Where we brought one of the weaver directly from no Nusa Tenggara
So we got
in
okay,
Timor. Yes,
Timor,
so
yeah,
from
yeah,
Timor. Yes, thank you. So from Timor, who came
that
and he was
product from
and
Timor, and it's just it was raining, so they cannot even get the leaves to be dried, right? Because the leaves has to come out first, and it has to be dried. Yeah.
yep, exactly. So it's in a way, like, we're in different places, but all with a shared experience here.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what makes it super unique. And the more people should understand, this is why it's not cheap. This is why it's not, China cheap or mass produced cheap, because it really takes time. It's really an art.
Yeah, I think what I want to add, what you said there, is like we embrace. I think we all embrace the intensive handmade nature of the production, right? And which leads to our products that can last a lifetime, and which is very different than getting something and you wear it 3 times and it start breaking. And yeah, of course, this means that our production is different and it's complicated. And I think that's sometimes it's not being seen by many, because why is this cost this much? And it's the quality of a handmade product versus the lead time, like what you just said. It's raining outside, cannot bring it out there. And I've got customers that would come up and say like, oh, can you have that in 2 weeks? I'm like, excuse me, no, for that much, no.
Yeah, and I think that's what I always say, that it leads to such amazing stories for us to tell later on. What we'll do is we have a few questions now, so we have last 10 minutes left. Pifin, if you could just share the Slido screen, please. And guys, this is a open forum, so please, if you feel
Yeah.
like unmuting yourself and asking a question, please feel free to do that. Okay, maybe I'll get started with some of the questions as I can see, and while Pifin shares it. This was okay. This is, I think, Yuki, for you. The first question is about how did you go about choosing different communities in the Philippines?
Okay,
I
so
think you did touch on it, maybe.
yeah, so honestly, to find our Style Cat communities, I had to physically go. You really have to immerse yourself. I mean, yes, there are trade fairs, yes, there are bazaars, but it's really different when you really go and go to the markets and see what they're selling, and that's how you realize that's I think that's our process to really find the best of the best, because the thing is, the Philippines, they're known for exporting these baskets. But once a client tells them, okay, you're going to export to this country, but you cannot share about it, you cannot be posting it anywhere, so you really won't find them normally, like researching online. So, a way also that we try to find communities is, we also check who need it the most. Sometimes we meet a community and they don't really answer our inquiries, as if, we don't feel prioritized, or I don't get the vibe that they would need the help. So I would really try to find communities where I know, our small orders would really make a difference to their families, would really make a difference to the moms who work from their homes. So that's how I go about choosing different communities. One, how keen are they? Like, do I see initiative? And of course, I look at the quality. Is it export quality? And yeah, then with the initiative, you see if they're always sending nice pictures, or they're cooperating with the product development. So that's how I went about choosing different communities in the Philippines. Thank you for the question.
Thanks a lot, Yuki. I think this is a question I'd already asked to both of you. Does it act as a barrier? So maybe we will skip this one. Um, Ria, I'll start with you on this question. Big question, very deep question. What is the significance of crafts in the artisans' lives?
It's big, right? I think it's big, both Indonesia and Nepal. Although of course the livelihood is plays a big part as well, because again, for our Pokhara collection with our partner Nepal, it is a skill development program, bringing previously abused, previously trafficked women into the skill development program. But when during this pandemic, we had an extra support, or we kind of pivot in our support for the artisans in Nepal in their community. So our proceed went to purchasing food supplies for about 20 plus families there. And when our partner had the food supplies in the city, and this goes into the pride of craftsmanship, and the women and the men who came to the city to pick up the food supplies, they were dressed beautifully. And that kind of relates to the significance of crafts, because they took and wear the outfit of the ones that they made themselves, or in the community that was given to them on the craftsmanship. So yes, the significance of crafts in the artisans' lives is important.
Perfect. I can see more questions coming in, and I'm looking at one eye on the time as well. So maybe we'll move to the next one. And I think this is for both of you. COVID, and I think this is a question we get again and again.
Yeah.
And COVID impacted artisans because of lack of retail opportunities available to them. For your communities, and this is for both of you, how has this impact been actually?
Not good. So, like I mentioned earlier, in Indonesia, some of our artisans there had to find jobs outside their current, because there's all the orders were canceled. And another set of artisans had to let go some of their staff temporarily. So it's really bad. I think we all know it. The economy is getting hit. A lot of businesses, a lot of even in Singapore, there's permanent closed businesses, and in Nepal, they were going hungry. So, like I mentioned earlier, we pivot, and through the sale of our products, whatever we can do, we support the artisans and their community in Nepal in terms of food supplies. and it just costs $25 for a family of 4 for a month. That's all it is. So,
But that goes a long way.
yeah,
That really goes a
Yeah.
long way.
they were eating beaten rice when the time we came there. Now we, meaning our partners, went to their place. So it definitely has impacted them. And now they're coming back on board. And immediately what we're doing is, in order to support them, is to make orders for them. Just make sure they get started and get the wheels moving.
That's
Mm.
really good to know. Yeah, Yuki, what about you?
Yeah, I super agree. And, I think in general, everybody has been deeply affected, especially like in terms of fashion, since Style Cat is all about, fashionable pieces. And what we do is just really, like what you said earlier, is to pivot and to support them with continuously making orders. What we do is, since a lot of our stores were closed, we focused on corporate orders. We focused on finding more intimate weddings, where they would have a bigger budget per, to give tokens out. So we're really thankful that through the corporate orders, through the special orders, the customized ones, and through the hand loomed fabric, we made ear savers where they could hang their surgical masks on to avoid rashes on the ears. So just those tiny bits, tiny steps help them. So we're glad it was able to help somehow. And yeah, right now we're slowly picking up, and just finding it's just all about making our e-commerce platform stronger as well. Now we can't, it's very hard to just rely on the physical stockists. So we're just pushing harder online, pushing harder on online marketing for the sake of our artisans.
Well, that's amazing to know, because at least there are very conscious efforts that are being done by all of us, and it's great to mention that. I think, Yuki, I'll keep this at you and Riel on the last question, because that is more interesting. How do you answer customers who ask, so what? Just the fact that products are artisan made, how do you answer the so what?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, yeah, a lot of people will really compare your price apples to apples to something really cheap, and it's like, it's so tiring to go on over and over again. But there will be a cost. All I think about is there will always be a customer database that will align with your brand values. You will always have a market for handmade, and if somebody asks like, so what, then he doesn't see the value in it. And it just says that, okay, I mean, you won't say it, but it's like, you're clearly not our market, so bye.
I think for Purnama, we've been fortunate. They may say that, but when we're in an event, pop-ups here in Singapore, or even when we bring our products to the US, when you touch it, immediately it's high quality. And the other thing in Singapore is the older generation would touch the product, the Pokhara collection, immediately gets us, wow, this is well made. I'm like, thank you. I was like, this is good, But I think the appreciation of it is there. I think the pricing, we do have to look at how much we're priced, and then look at how comparable it is among the community in terms of like for like. Obviously, things may not be exactly the same, especially when it's coming from other region, let's say from South America, and bringing it into Singapore. Definitely, you have to count on the cost as well.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important, because you have to keep the cost not astronomically high, because
Yeah, it has to be like market value. Like, you can't be that high, and because what happens is, if you price too high, then you won't really get the volume, and the artisans won't get the future orders, because you're still stuck with the current inventory. So it's also a challenge to keep the prices very accessible for what it is.
No, definitely. And I think it depends on the product. I worked a lot on the textile art side when I was working and with tribes in Indonesia, extremely remote, but like crazy amount of detailing going into the work. But those drapes were not products to be worn. They were pieces of art. So they should be compared to pieces of art. And I think that's where the pricing comparison comes in. I guess we'll move to the last question and wrap up the session. And it's actually not a bad question to wrap up the session, that how do you see the traditional meeting the modern? And that could be a That's actually a very good question so that we can wrap up this session. So, Ray, I would ask you this. How do you see it evolving and where do you see it going from here?
I think it's definitely a evolution of how we want to preserve ethnicity in our cultures and diversity of cultures around the world. Is do we want to leave it behind or do we want to be part of it? And as we see this, it takes a community. It doesn't take one person. So, such as the Green Collective is bringing all the communities together, different ways of different type of products. And again, when we talk about craftsmanship, it's really about culture, and you don't want your culture to disappear. So, with that, traditional art evolve into modern demands. We need to know, we need to stand. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't expect my Nepalese partners or Indonesian partners to have and to adopt the unsustainable methods of mass production. And to that is a thinking that we have to bring that sustainable way of living for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I super agree. I think it's also about when you say modern demands, I also feel like the market now is very, I feel like there's a strong love in supporting local, in supporting their very own artisans. So, if anything, I could see the traditional handicraft evolve, and it will be even appreciated further and embraced more by the community, because when we share these stories about the artisans, when we share the origin, the techniques involved into making it, the more they appreciate it. So if anything, I can just see the demand for it going higher, and it will evolve into something that, like more fashionable or more for the new normal, but the point is it involves with us. So if anything, we are taking it with us.
And I
Yeah.
think this is a great way to kind of wrap up the session because my point on heritage and culture and its relevance has been that it will always stay relevant because it's so many
Yeah.
years of preserved knowledge that we as human beings have had, and it's improved year on year and century on century for so many centuries that it's tough to kind of do the math there. But sorry for going over time, but the discussion was so amazing. So thanks a lot, Ray, Yuki, for joining us and telling us about the amazing work you're doing. Thanks a lot to everyone else for taking out time. Sorry we went a bit overboard on the time, but thanks a lot. Do check out Purnama as well as Style Cat and other brands. Uh, do visit us at Green Collective since we are actually open now. That's a great thing. And you can also find all these brands online. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah,
Just stay
thank you
tuned.
everybody for joining and tuning
Yeah.
in.
Thanks. Bye. Have a good evening, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.